everybody, and welcome to our last pop-up session for the year 2023. So we're gonna talk today about the history of our software. Where are we coming from, where are we right now, and where will we probably be in a few moments, weeks, years, we'll see. And to do so, I got Sebastian here with me, and of course also Jens, who will be there for the chat. So whenever you have any questions, any comments, just write everything into the chat, and we're going to talk about it live today. And I would say we'll just get started, right? Yeah. Where are we coming from? When we talk about the software of our shop roasters, you probably remember a time where you needed to decide if you want to buy the roaster with the software or if you want to buy it without the software. And this of course has changed. So nowadays you just get it with the software, and when we think back of the software we were having, we of course have some pictures that we can share, and we're going to show you and talk a little bit about what did we do before we had the software version we are having right now. So when we have a look at the picture, what we can see here is the software version of how the software was before. Okay, just a few more moments. So. And when we look at this picture here, this is probably what people know having a roaster from 2014, 15, and so on. So what we see here is actually we had our curves. We were showing the curve of the roasting temperature of the burner, and of course also of the back then so-called TDI, the temperature difference indicator. And when we look at the roaster or at the screen, we also see of course the schematic of the roaster, where we could back then only see whenever there was a motor running, it was turning green. Whenever the drum was running, this was turning green. So this is something we don't see like this today, but we also don't need it. So maybe this was just done to fill the space. And looking at the picture, we saw of course back then we could save recipes, give it a name, write down how much kilograms we were roasting, and of course also we could change it a little bit. And as I said before, back then we only saw the steps of the burner, and of course we also saw the resulting roasting curve, and we saw what was happening in the temperature development. And when you were using this type of recipe and you wanted to go auto mode, what happened back then was that the machine was only doing the burner steps that you were doing in your actual roasting profile. And of course, just thinking of how roasting is going on, about all the outer circumstances that you could have, we do know that this of course cannot be used summer or winter, or different coffees, or coffees having different densities, different moisture content. So back then the roast master of course needed to be a little bit more controlling. So whenever there was a change in burner setting, we needed to check, is the curve still running the same? If not, we needed to adjust the burner, going a little bit higher in power or a little bit more low in power, just to meet our roasting curve. And let me see if there is another picture. Oh, thank you. And here we see how a recipe back then looked. But what we also did, we could put this curve in the background, and then we saw the actual curve running on top of it so that we can follow how it was going. So this is more or less what we kept when coming up with the new idea of software. So we still have the possibility of roasting completely automatic. So the machine will be doing the job, the software. We could also use the curve, put it in the background, and we can of course roast completely manual. But this has changed a lot, because what are we doing today? We are not only just, or the software is not only just following the steps of the burner, of the heating, but it's looking for the temperature for the product. So according to the temperature of the coffee, the temperature of the air in the room, the pressure that we're having in the system, the burner now is realizing, do we need more or less power, and it's adapting by itself. And I think this is a super cool feature. And to demonstrate this, we also prepared a short video, which we're gonna show you now, so that you see how actually the software is working today. And here we see the blue dotted curve. This is the curve that we want to reach, the recipe that we stored. It's a first batch, and we all know first batch probably should not be taken to create a recipe from this, but back then we didn't have different possibilities, so this is what we took. And we see now our blue curve, the complete blue line. This is the automatic roast, and we see how the burner is already adjusting as it feels that the turning point is not met, and so it's already reducing the power. And this is something which is now done completely by itself. So checking for the temperature curve, the burner is adjusting itself. And this is of course not only applying for machines with a burner, a real gas burner, but also for all the machines that are heated with electricity. So this software is now in all of our shop roaster systems, from P1, even the sample roaster has it, and also going up to P25. We're going to use the same software, which is pretty cool, as you can also go ahead and take recipes from a smaller machine and bring it to the bigger machine. But of course also here there might be some slight adjustments, not because the curve is not running the same, but probably at the end, due to the bigger mass of coffee, we are not having the exact same color. So by wanting to reach the exact same color, you will need to adapt the recipe if you go from a P01 to a P25 and take the same recipe. But it's completely doable. We tried it out with a recipe of 500 grams, roasted on a P05. And then we roasted on a P01, and then we took this to a P5 and just roasted full batch of 5 kilograms. P01 being electrical heated, P5 was gas heated. Also here, as we say, it's only adapting due to the temperature of the product. It does not really matter what heating source we're actually using. And we see now, as in the beginning, the curve was a little bit too fast, then was a little tiny bit too slow. But now the curve is running super exactly the way we wanted to have. So auto mode is now a real feature that can be used by people that are alone in the roastery, that just do some extra work in between, getting new green beans, pack the roasted coffee, and then of course the few first moments or all the process. You can use the auto mode. Well, at the end, of course, we will need to check the color. As we do know, the smaller systems, they're having a lot of influences coming from our conditions. So this still, if we reach end temperature, we're gonna have more or less the same color, but just in case, keep on checking. So this is where we are at the moment, and for us the most important is to know about how you like the software. Is there some things that you probably discover which you might don't like, where you say, okay, in practical issues it could be changed a little bit. So you need to let us know, because for us, we're not a roastery, so we roast from time to time, but not that often. So the feedback is for us super important with this. We're going to develop the software more and more, and of course it's necessary to run the updates so that all of the things that are new inside the software will be, of course, also be with your machine and be applied to your machine. Yeah, short overview, what we had, what we have, and of course super important to know what could probably come in the future and what's necessary that it could come in the future, because we have been talking about this before, and Sebastian, he had some important insights, because creating a software like this is not as simple as we always think that it is.
Yeah, maybe just a tease of what's going to happen at some point in the future, maybe. Dani just described that there's always a discrepancy if you use auto mode between different machines and different batch sizes. And this raises the question, is there a better way to do it and to get rid of the problem? And the answer is, yeah, there should be. And we're working on it. And well, I don't know if maybe we jump right into that and just get a little bit behind the scenes what we're doing.
Yeah, sure.
1 second. So I hope you can see my presentation now. And this is something we presented at the biggest scientific conference there is in the world right now, the ASIC. So this is scientifically found. So you can look it up, it's published, nothing new if you're into that sort of thing. What we want to do is we want to transfer heat to the coffee beans. We can do that by supply gas and mass flow. And you can do this, well, for your case, it's a burner and a fan. If you have a bigger machine, you also have flaps. Then there's heat flow. You have your bean, you have your incoming energy, you have your outgoing energy, energy that goes to the metal, energy that goes to the bean, energy that's transferred between the bean and the metal, and you have energy coming from the bean, which is called exothermic heat. Most of you probably have seen that at the end of your roasting, and if you haven't, you're not roasting very dark.
Yeah.
So we built a model to incorporate all of those effects to get to a model that doesn't use product temperature as the auto mode anymore, but therefore use energy, which is the actual cause of everything. Like, why does coffee change its taste? It changes its taste because there was a certain amount of energy which made some chemical think, well, if I turn into this, I'm more tasteful.
That's a nice way to describe it.
Yeah. There are others that don't taste as good, but we don't like those. So I don't want to get too deep into it, so let's talk about the stream tube model and why this is something you would like. This basically describes how much air is flowing through your roaster at any given second. Do you know that? Nope, we don't know either. That's why we created a model for it. And we're working hard to get this implemented into your machines at some point, so that there's not all those tweaking factors anymore, but your machine can tweak itself all the time, anywhere, anytime. That's the goal of this. I'm not going into the details of how we are doing this, and you can look it up if you want to. The next thing is the heat transfer coefficients. We did crazy amount of computational fluid dynamics to determine how much energy we can transfer to the coffee beans. You probably saw this presentation slide in one of our other pop-up slides, but this is at the very core of what roasting is. How do we transfer energy to our coffee bean? All the crazy stuff we do is just to get the picture at the top to be as perfect as possible. So we did the math, and we think we now know. Yeah, at the bottom you see particular simulations now that we did to see how does a roaster work. If you don't recognize the roaster, well, yeah, it's one of our laboratory machines. We're working on simulations of the P05 as of right now and in the future, but it's not published yet. That's unimportant. And the final thing is coffee models. Like Donnie has said before, there's things that influence the roasting a lot, which is moisture content and density and size of the beans. So we can build all the models we want. If we don't know roughly those parameters, we're just not going to have good results. At the very least, we need the initial moisture content, which is not too hard to get, fortunately. The rest we can infer. And by doing crazy math and a lot of optimization, we can fit models to your coffee. Obviously, you don't want to do this, so maybe in some point in the future, you're just going to roast 2-3 test batches and then hit analyze, and we're going to tell you how your coffee is going to behave under different conditions. Maybe you will even be able to just roast your coffee virtually on your machine without ever turning anything more than the power for the processors on. And then once you have those graphs, you can see if it works for real. And we hope that it will. We're pretty positive, but that's still some way off into the future.
So virtual roasting would then mean, of course, for the people who use it, they don't need to waste all of the coffee just to come up with an idea about how much energy would I need to get to roasting time of, I don't know, 13 minutes, 30 seconds, whatsoever. So they can try it out before they actually dump any bean inside the roaster.
Exactly.
That's cool.
You could do crazy things, like if you want to have a sine wave and you want to play around with your burner, just try it virtually and see if the real roasting curve acts like it should. And if we did a good job, and we're good engineers, so I think we did, you will be able to do this. And the real benefit you're going to get from this is not that you can play around virtually on your roasting curves. The real benefit is that we can take work off your hands. So the automatic mode is then not just going to play around with the burner, it's going to optimize for energy. It's going to take a curve you had and make it more efficient. So you use less gas, less electricity, and have your roaster pay for itself faster. Or just maybe do recipe optimization, the recipe you already have, and we're going to tell you, well, if you don't do it the way you used to, but add 2% here, you lose 3% there, you're going to save, what, maybe 5% of energy, maybe more, maybe less, which is also a benchmark of how good you were from the start.
And the cool thing is, even though it kind of sounds like the Roastmaster would probably be not needed in the future anymore, we still need those people, because they need to come up with an idea first, they need to come up with a recipe first, and of course they also have the understanding of what will be the outcome in terms of aroma if I do roast like this and this and this. But if they do have the idea, we can just make it better, more accurate, and also of course easier to be reproduced, to come up with the same taste and all the time.
The entire development of a coffee needs still to be done by hand.
Yes.
There's no way we can do this. Taste is very hard to put into numbers. And what we see our challenge is, how can we make your roasting more efficient? How can you make more use of your time? It's not the greatest job to just stand at a roaster and do 50 batches in a row. So maybe we can make that easier for you, so you can do something else in the meantime. And that's what we're working on. And at the same time, make it more efficient, make it cost less for you.
But then to be able to do this, of course, we need also, or the people roasting, what they need to do is they need to give some information, right? Because if we don't know about the size, the moisture, the density, maybe the age of the coffee, and all of this that has an influence, this won't work, right?
Exactly. The problem that we're facing at the moment is we can roast here, obviously, and we do a lot of roasting, but compared to you guys, it's a drop in the water. Like, we have no idea what crazy ideas you have, and we can't imagine all the things that you're doing. So we need data to have models that are resilient to things. Like, if you do something very extreme, which we haven't thought of, the models are not going to work if we don't know about it. If you're like doing the standard roasting, you should be fine. But we need a lot of data for lots of different coffees to make the model as resilient as possible, so that you don't need to put much data in yourself, so that we can infer it for you.
So here we would be back at the point of feedback.
Yeah,
because
we
don't have the possibilities to come up with all the crazy ideas or all the new trends or all the probably all the new preparation methods for the coffee, which gives new tastes and new flavor profiles. And also all the coffees that are out there. There's so much variety in coffee, we can't cover all of it. It's just simply impossible. Sounds pretty cool. And also what we can do is, by analyzing the data you have, we can tweak the roasters to be more efficient for what you're doing. Because right now it's just from the feedback you're getting us. If you're writing on Facebook or in groups, obviously we're reading that. But then we're going to have direct feedback from you. We can see what you're actually doing, and we can optimize the roasters even more to your specialized needs. But we need to know about them first. Yeah, true. This is with all of the things. If we don't know it, if we don't, also of the software version we're having today, sometimes we figure out that you do some stuff which we probably would not think of, and then the software is doing something weird. But the cool thing is that the older version of the software we did not do ourselves, so somebody external was doing it. But now the guy who's doing it, Lucas, he has a lot of cool ideas, and he also puts it into the software. But what he does then is he goes to the showroom, he puts the new software version on the roaster, and then he tries out if it's working in practice, what he thinks about it in theory. And then sometimes you find out, well, it was a cool idea, but it's not working. And then of course also sometimes we get ideas in your feedback where we have to say, well, it's kind of hard to implement that in a software, and we really need to figure out how to do this and how much of this would actually make sense. So 200 people have 400 different ideas, and at some point there is sometimes where we need to say, well, no, we can't, we just cannot do it. And then of course we have to find out how to make this customer happy without putting all of the ideas into the software. But also for me it sounds like this is already like really future talking.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't even want to put a number to it when will be the time that we're gonna have it. But on the other hand, it's
if we put a number to it, we're not going to meet it. So
okay, no, we don't we don't do it. But the cool thing is just to know that there's always inventions going on. So it's like what I'm having for the past 5 to 10 years. I'm always thinking, well, now we're really at the point where it cannot get better, and it's always getting better. It's always getting, also for me at some point, a little bit more complicated in terms of what's behind it.
Oh yeah.
But then when using it, it makes it just so much easier. So the life of the roastmaster, of the person in front of the machine, will hopefully become a little bit easier when it comes to the idea of having different coffees, trying to have the same outcome in time, and then see what will be the result in flavor and aroma. So
yeah, absolutely. And we're also trying, like I said before, we're trying to improve your life. Like what we could think of is maybe, hey, while you're roasting, maybe we could give you like some tool tips. Like just figure out, hey, you have the same coffee, but it behaves different. Maybe increase your burner power now before you actually see it, because computers are so much faster at detecting changes than we are. Like your eye would still say, nope, going great. And the computer is going to be like, nope, this is going way off, because it looks at parameters that you didn't even think to check.
Yeah, so it's really helping with stuff that we don't even put into consideration.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's just a helper. It doesn't replace the human. It just is another tool in your toolbox to make the best coffee possible.
Do you think that this will create some more crazy ideas where we then probably at the end say, oh gee, now they are coming up with this, how should we do that, how should we implement it? Or are you quite sure that whatever idea that comes, we're going to be able to do it?
Since the entire modeling, everything that's behind this is strictly physical. It's one of our rules. We work physical. We don't use artificial intelligence or anything for anything that goes on inside the roaster yet, because we want things to be physical, behave like they would in the real world. If you can think it, we can probably do it. And if our software can do it, then it's probably not possible.
Yeah. Because sometimes we get some feedback that people say, well, maybe you should not use the burner setting as a parameter. Okay, yeah, we're not doing that anymore. Now we use the temperature of the product, which I think already it's quite some big step. But then of course there's other that say, yeah, but maybe you should not use this as well. Maybe there's some other parameter, like for example, use the rate of rise and do something with this. Use this to actually run the roaster.
Yeah.
In my opinion, this is not always the right way to go, because rate of rise is also, it's not always behaving the same depending on also how the parameters are set. If we do have different dump speed, if we do have different airflow, rate of rise will change as we have different heat transfer.
Well, mathematically speaking, the rate of rise is the derivative of the product temperature. So they are hardly coupled. They behave the same. If the one changes, the other will change too. So the problem with, if you would, for example, use a control on the rate of rise, and that would certainly not be a problem to implement, but the problem is if you have a difference going up or down the rate of rise, like you have with the product temperature, if you over or undershoot, you can never come back to your product curve. Because let's say you were over your rate of rise, you were too fast. And then the controller is going to be like, oh, I was too high, and then it's going to try to come back to your initial rate of rise. And let's say it does that, and then it does everything perfect. If you then look at your product temperature, it's going to be offset to the top. It's never going to return to the real temperature,
And this is
product temperature curve, because the controller did everything right. It tried to go back to the real rate of rise. So it did that, and that worked. But the product temperature is going to have an offset because the controller didn't know that it's working on the derivative of what it's actually supposed to be doing. So that's why we use the product temperature as our control, because if we overshoot, which you see as a difference in rate of rise, we can come back to the product temperatures, which is what we actually wanted in the first place. So what the controller is doing right now, it's really, really trying hard to hit the rate of rise, because if it hits the rate of rise, it hits the product curve.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And controlling the other curve just leads to unintended effects, I would call that.
Yeah. Yeah, for me also, what I understand is the rate of rise is actually just tiny dots taken out of the product temperature curve, referred to a different curve with the formula behind it. But super simply speaking, just when seeing your formulas, this is, I know. But for me, the product temperature is also, it's giving me a hint when I'm having my same product temperature, I'm very close to the color that I'm needing. And if I'm in my same roasting time, the aroma outcome in my cup will be more or less the same.
Well, yes. If you overshot, you probably would have wanted to undershoot a little bit somewhere.
Yeah.
Because what you actually want to transfer is energy. And if you overshot at some point, you put more energy in. So if you were over, you can probably add 1 or 2 points to your color because you added more energy. If you undershot, same thing other way. So maybe if you undershot, add a little time to it. If you overshot, shorten it a little bit.
Yeah.
That's basically what we're doing right now. But like I said before, we're working on actually doing it on energy. And if we're controlling energy, then that problem just won't arise anymore.
Yeah, that sounds super cool. Yeah, hopefully we did not lose you, but this is also my moment to discuss with Sebastian a little bit more, because usually we don't have that time to do that, but for me it's super interesting as I see the roasting more in terms of standing in front of the machine, watching the beans, hearing the beans, feeling the beans, and then seeing that your idea of how this is done in terms of physics and that the two meet each other, we only say it with different wording. This is, I like it, it's super cool. But at this point, I'm just going to turn to Jens. Is there already some comments in the chat, some questions? No?
No? Solid maybe? Well,
if not, we can also go on if you have
sure.
more interesting
No question yet regarding the software.
Cool. Then we just continue. Is there more amazing things that you would like to share?
There's more amazing things, but I don't want to share. Or I would love to share, but
You're not
I've been told that we do not tell you yet.
Okay, then we won't. Then we're just gonna wait for the things to come. And of course, in the meantime, we're gonna use the software version that we're having. We're gonna work on this, of course, as well. So whenever there's anything that you have in mind that comes up, or maybe, I don't know how open we are in taking in other ideas of what we're doing right now.
Absolutely, if you have any idea, just shoot for it.
Yeah, that would be super amazing, just because there's so many different thinking behind all of the curves, all of the math, all of the parameters that we see. So as soon as you go and talk to people, everybody comes up with different ideas of what could be done and how it could be done, and what should be measured inside the roaster. But of course, there is also some energy things that you just cannot measure. For example, when we talk about the energy that we use with convection, the energy that we use via contact, this is obviously everything that we can measure, but the radiation, for example...
Oh no, we're measuring that.
Okay,
we're not measuring it directly, we're measuring it indirectly.
Indirectly, by knowing what's going on inside then?
No, you can actually measure it with certain measurement equipment.
Okay, but this is just what you do, not what we do.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
But at the same time, we're using different sensors, maybe sensors you well, actually one sensor you already know about is the infrared sensor, which is becoming widely more popular lately, because this is much closer to what's actually happening inside the roaster, because everybody knows the dip that the product temperature does. If you think about it, the bean doesn't do that. It's loaded at 20 degrees, it's not loaded at 120 degrees. So the product temperature should start at 20 and go up, which is what's happening with infrared temperatures, with infrared temperature sensors. And to be physically accurate, you need those temperatures, which are still not really accurate because it's just the temperature of the outside of the bean, which is not the temperature of the bean, because at the inside it's still cooler than on the outside. And those are all things that we need to consider. Yeah. But it's better than before.
Yeah, this is also one super important thing, because sometimes there is some books that say your turning point should never be below a certain temperature, where I then say, well, it definitely is, because it's not really a turning point, it's just a point in temperature where the bean goes up from room temperature by the moment you load it anyways.
It's not wrong to say that, it's just only valid for that roaster.
Yeah, and that coffee, and yeah exactly, because in a lot of different roasters we have different turning points.
Exactly, for a certain roastery it's absolutely valid to use that, because there's physics behind that turning point on that machine for that coffee at that time of year, if you don't have a climatized room. Yeah. But yeah, for somebody else it's going to be something else.
Yeah, and this is why it's so hard when sometimes people put it in words in books, for example, and somebody else is reading it and then thinks this is the only way how it should be done, and then seeing and finding out that with the roaster they're having it's not working, but then it's not. It's just because of the machine and of everything that's going on inside the machine.
Yeah, something we found out lately is that we had discrepancies with someone who tested it for us, and we found out that his roaster has a lot more thermal mass. Like it absorbed much more heat, so the part of radiation was much higher than we anticipated, because it was not a ProBat machine. And that was really interesting to find out that how much of a difference there was, and how much there can be a difference of philosophy, because our machines by design don't have a lot of thermal mass, so you can switch temperatures fairly quickly. But if you want to have your coffee, let's call it linger a little bit, then it's could be better to have radiation energy. So different machines do different things good.
Yeah, it's sometimes we experience that when people talk about the so-called soaking time, which they actually would do in a roaster that would have exactly that. So they take the energy coming from the material, which has been heated up before. But as in our roasters, there is not that much energy coming from the material, as we use more energy coming from the hot air. Doing that so-called soaking might not work in the same way of what they know from a different roasting system. And then, of course, the idea and the philosophy behind that person's roasting could be changed by getting a different roaster.
Well, not necessarily to getting a different roaster, you just need to change your mindset a little bit. You can still get the same results.
Exactly. You get the same results, but with different approach of your roasting process. Exactly. Yeah, cool.
Still no questions.
Still no questions. So that either
we knocked them out. We're completely knocked out.
They're completely lost.
Lost. That was already some cool views into the future and things that might gonna come and gonna happen. We'll see what will be going on in the software of our roasting machines. We also hope that we can apply it from all of the smaller to the bigger, so that people can share and use them, and this will be then also a big benefit that sharing of recipes will definitely be much easier than in between the ProBat family, hopefully. And if there's no questions, which I believe, because otherwise Jens would have said something, and if there's nothing more that you want to add, then for us, I think it's time to close the year, to say thank you for watching. Of course, looking forward to have you with us for the next year as well. We're going to change a little bit, but you're going to see. So from our side, we're going to wish you a nice Christmas season, And if there's any questions that will probably show up when you watch the video again or later, just go ahead, make sure that you contact us via email, via any method that there's possible, so that we can answer all the questions. And probably this time, it's not going to be me, it's going to be Sebastian answering the questions. So thanks for watching, and see you back next year.
Bye.
Bye.
Goodbye.